Welcome, everyone, to the next episode of Conversations with Therapists. My name is Sherry Amster, and today we're talking to Dr. Gold. Hi, Dr. Gold. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. So, we're really excited to talk to you today. And I just wanted to start by getting a little bit of background about yourself and how you got into the mental health space.
Sure. I am a licensed professional clinical counselor. I have a doctorate in psychology. I work with teens, adults, and couples, mostly around issues like anxiety, relationships, and parenting. I've always had an interest in mental health, and once I started doing my education, it just really confirmed my desire to work in this field. I've seen a lot of clients really struggle with connection, whether it's with their partners, their kids, or even themselves. And it made me really curious about the patterns that we repeat in relationships and how those patterns often go all the way back to childhood. I've always loved digging deep and helping people understand what's driving their behavior and watching them shift into healthier, more connected versions of themselves.
That's so interesting. Can you talk a little bit more about how the patterns we see in our relationships trace back to childhood?
Yeah, sure. A lot of the experiences, actually, most of the experiences that we go through really shape us. And so a lot of the times we're really unaware of how these past experiences continue to emerge and affect our, current and future relationships. So that's where our work comes in, right? In therapy, where we can really explore and examine a lot of those past experiences, past traumas, how they affected that specific client and how they continue to reemerge in relationships. Again, a lot of the times we're just not really aware of those experiences, how they really affected us. Sometimes we are, sometimes we are not, and it's very interesting, right? Because 10 people can go through the same experience, and each person can be affected differently, just based on who they are, right? Their perspective of the situation. And that's again where my job comes in, is really fascinating, where we can really explore and peel back those layers and really figure out how they're affecting their current life.
So if you have someone who's maybe um, stuck in their relationships and they're not sure where to go, are there any identifying features where they could say to themselves, like, oh, maybe it's time to seek help, or maybe there's like a deeper issue happening here?
Sure. I mean, when someone feels stuck, in a negative cycle, like, for example, constant arguing, shutting down, repeating the same old fights, I really help them slow things down and figure out what's underneath it all. A lot of the time I really see that, people just keep on repeating the same things over and over and over, and keep thinking that either something will change, or maybe that their partner or the other person in the relationship will just finally get it, right? And a lot of times that just, it doesn't happen. So it's not really usually about like that one argument, right? It's about deeper patterns that they may not even be aware of. So therapy really gives us a chance to unpack those patterns, um, build insight, practice new ways of showing up, and change is absolutely possible, even if it felt impossible for a long time.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I'm just thinking back to what you said at the beginning, how you deal with couples, teens, but also like anxiety, and it's all sort of interconnected. And so when someone's having, trouble in a relationship, it could also be stemming from, their own trauma, like you said, or their own anxiety. And so how do you see the interconnectedness of all of this manifest in the clients that you see?
Well, I mean, that's where, my work really comes in, and trying to really understand, exactly what's going on. I spend a lot of time, really assessing, what is happening in that client's life from their perspective to, what their relationship dynamics are. And we really look at what's going on without judgment, right? And I think that's what sets therapy apart, is that you can really explore things without that judgment, in a really safe place with a professional. So a lot of the time people just come in thinking maybe they need help with, like, you know communication. But what we end up working on is understanding, their emotional triggers, their attachment style, and the deeper needs that maybe haven't even been expressed. So for like romantic relationships, right, therapy helps people move from blame to understanding of themselves and their partners. For parent-child relationships, it can help break old cycles and give parents more tools to just connect without losing themselves in the process. So it's really not about, being perfect. It's about becoming more aware, more intentional, and more emotionally available.
I read a book one time and it was talking about how people come with a presenting problem,
Yeah.
but really the presenting problem is like really there's a lot more that's going on beneath the surface. And so the presenting problem might be like, oh, I'm going through a really tough breakup or I lost my
Right.
job or something like that. But really, once they go to therapy and they get into the weeds of it, there's really a lot more going on.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
It's so fascinating when you finally have that realization of like, oh, this is actually what's been bothering me. It can be a very, like you can feel like a weight has been lifted off your shoulders.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's a lot of patterns that we're just unaware of that, we keep on repeating, whether, that's ourselves or finding, partners or people in our lives that are also just repeating those same patterns and, just really replay out those old relationships that we're just trying to repair. And really the work starts with us, right? And so again, that's the cool part about my work is uncovering all of that.
Yeah, and it's interesting also because I feel like in couples therapy, a lot of people walk in also being like, oh, I'm good, and the therapist is going to take my side, and my partner is going to have to do all the work. And really, after a couple of sessions, hopefully they come to realize that it's, a joint effort.
Right. Well, I mean, every relationship always takes two, and I remind that of everyone, regardless of, a situation or experience that happened, there was two people that led to that, right? So each person has a part and, it's I think it's very eye-opening when parties realize that they also had a part into getting where they are to, at the time they came into therapy.
Yeah, and I feel like it also gives, a sense of ownership and empowerment in the relationship. Like it's not just the world happening to you, but you're an active participant in it and you need to own that as well.
100%. Absolutely. That responsibility, taking accountability, that ownership is huge.
Yeah. And relationships also, they're so important and they're so complex and challenging. And when you're in a bad relationship, it can really, impact so many different aspects of your life.
Right.
Is that something you see as well?
Oh, yes. Relationships are just, they're really hard. They're complex. When they feel like they're falling apart, it shakes your whole foundation. But feeling hopeless doesn't mean that like you are hopeless, right? It just means that you're stuck and probably overwhelmed and haven't had the right kind of support yet.
Can you talk a little bit about some of I mean, it definitely depends on, why each couple is coming into your therapy session, but can you give a little bit of like coping skills or some things that people can work on or some advice you would give for couples who are feeling stuck in their relationship?
Yes, I really feel like it's just best to start small. I think that, a lot of times people come in and there's just, all of this, change and advice, to come drastically change, the relationship and everything that's going on, which is just overwhelming. It's a lot. So I just think it's best to start small. You don't have to fix everything all at once. So I mean, maybe it's just reaching out to a therapist, right? Like setting one boundary, just getting honest with yourself about what's not working. I think understand that you're just not alone in this and that things can change is really empowering. So again, just starting really small and understanding the problem is really the best thing to do, right? You can't really accurately treat a problem if you don't understand it well. And I think again that's the issue that I see is there's just all these solutions and we don't really know what the problem is a lot of the time. So yeah, just starting small.
Yeah, everyone wants to just take the BuzzFeed quiz to find out what's wrong in their relationship.
Right, totally, right. And then there's like 20 things to do, and it's like, oh
Yeah.
my God. It's a lot.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting also that you work with parents and children. What are some common struggles that you find when a couple becomes a parent?
Oof, a lot. I mean, there is so much change that happens, especially when you're going from 0 to 1 child, even though, in some cases, right, there's like a lot of excitement and anticipation for this new person that's joining the family, it's a huge change. It changes a lot about the dynamic, about the communication. And there's also just biological changes that happen, for a mom after having a child. And it really can take a toll on the entire family dynamic. So, a lot of old cycles can come up. I think parents just really lack tools to continue their connection without losing themselves in the process, right? It's I don't feel like there's like enough preparation for couples to go through the parenting process, and enough tools, exactly what you're saying. But it really just starts at, again, communication, understanding that, like, you both are new at this and it's totally fine, and coming at each other with kindness and compassion, and just working on communication as best as possible.
Yeah, I feel like also self-compassion is super important because
Right.
you, especially with the first kid, like you don't know what you're doing. And so
Nobody knows. Right. Yeah.
and every decision feels like it's like the biggest deal in the world, whether it's like which diaper to buy or like formula or not formula. Like there's so much pressure.
There's a lot of pressure, and what I see is that like one parent or both, have like a certain way or process that they're doing something, and it's the only way and the only process. And like when the other parent steps in or another caregiver, it's like, oh my God, you're doing it all wrong. And it's like there's just so much added anxiety, with everything, and just a lot of expectations. And you're also functioning on very little sleep a lot of the time. So it's just hard. It's a really tough time. And again, like I said, just the more aware we are, the more intentional we are, the more emotionally available that we try to be, the better outcome we have.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned that you don't feel like parents have enough tools going into parenting. What are some of the tools that they can use or be aware of?
Yeah, for me, everything starts with like a solid foundation of taking care of yourself first and foremost. I see this all the time where parents go into, raising children with putting everyone else first before them. And, there's like a part of that that's natural and necessary, right? Like if your child's crying, you're not just gonna like neglect them, right? You're gonna get up and tend to them even if you're exhausted. But if you're going to continue to neglect taking care of yourself, then there's only so much that you can do. And it's kind of like that oxygen mask thing, right, in the plane, where if the plane's going down, and even if you have a child next to you, who does the oxygen mask go on first? Goes on yourself, right? Because if
Hmm.
you're out of commission, the baby's not going to put the oxygen mask on you, right?
Right.
So it's really about, what are the things that you need to take care of yourself, to show up, to be the best parent that you can be, to be the best partner that you can be. And parents don't really understand that, right? They think like, no, I have to do everything for everyone else, and I'll get to me later. But that's what leads to burnout, right? And that's not going to help anyone. So it's really prioritizing what is it that you need to be the best version of yourself, and in turn, that's how you will be the best parent and the best partner.
That's really good advice. I feel like everyone needs to just sit for a minute and internalize that.
Yeah.
But going more onto the kids themselves, because I know you also treat children, what kind of issues do you see when you're working with children? Is it like ADHD, troubled behavior? What are you looking at in your practice?
You know, um, I mean, all of it is, I see a lot of it, whether it's, mental health issues, mood disorders, ADHD, trouble with relationships, whether that is social or family relationships. So I see a lot of different things. It's also just a tough time right now, right? To be a child. There's just so much exposure to social media. And there's benefits with social media, and there's a lot of downfall with social media. And kids can be tough, and kids can be really cruel. So certainly a huge element is working on self-esteem and confidence, and absolutely boundaries, boundaries with other people, and boundaries with themselves, and understanding, am I getting too much exposure to social media, and is this adding or taking away from my life? And it's hard because a lot of clients really have trouble setting those boundaries, but once they do, and once they implement them, they see that they feel a lot better, right? Not having all of that exposure to negativity.
Yeah, just to go and play in the park again.
Play in the park, be present with your family, read a book, right? Do something. Yeah.
Yeah. And so because when you're working with kids, I assume there's also some sort of partnership with the parents because,
Right.
they're children. So I guess I have two questions for you based on that. One is what, when, because sometimes like a parent might not know, like maybe my child is just really difficult or really active. And so when should the parent say, like, maybe I need a little bit of extra help? And then my second question related to that is, how do you work with the kid and also keeping the parents in the loop and making sure that it's a healthy dynamic between the three parties?
Okay. So with the first question, I think, it's really tough to find exactly when that right time is. I think, and it's hard to like define that time. I think when you have enough experience with a person in your life, right? Like a family member, let's say you're talking about a child, you can start noticing and seeing that there's significant changes, right? Or maybe that they're shutting down, they're not really being as present. With kids, it's really about being consistent and emotionally present for them. But if that's not being reciprocated, and you're starting to notice, right, like a drop in grades, significant change in mood, changes in social relationships, those are times to really to start reaching out. What I see is a lot of people, whether it's with children, adults, right, relationships, is they kind of wait until it's like really bad and then it's a lot more difficult to come back from. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think, it's kind of like that curve, and kind of understanding like exactly when to address it before you completely redline, right? And it just becomes a lot more challenging. And so, in terms of how I work with families, it's really important for me to build rapport with the children that I see. And I really want to make sure that I give them a very safe, non judgmental space where they can really be themselves and they can trust me. So, I meet with parents and caregivers initially and let them know that this space is for their child. We come up with goals, and we come up with a treatment plan that we all agree on. And if family relationships, caregiver relationships are part of that treatment plan, then we definitely incorporate them. And I absolutely tell them, like, if there's a safety issue, like, they're going to know about it right away. And the client that I work with knows that that is something that I'll have to disclose right away. But high level, I touch base with the parents, let them know what's going on. Again, I work with my child client and let them know, okay, this is what we're saying. Just so I don't want them to feel like I'm breaching their trust.
And for people who don't know, what does therapy with a young child look like? Because I would have to assume it's not the same as a talk therapy session with a teen or an adult.
It depends. It depends. Since I work with predominantly adolescents and teens, there is a lot of the talk therapy aspect in my work with them. But a lot of the times too, it's life skills, social skills, relationship building, again, boundary setting, understanding themselves. Regardless if I'm working with a younger or older client, like my goal 100% of the time is for a client to leave knowing themselves significantly better than when they started with me, right? So we're understanding how they work, how their emotions work, how their thoughts and feelings work, and learning to manage them in a way that works for them, right? It's not a cookie cutter type of approach of, oh, this worked for somebody else, this will work for you. No, it's really understanding them and being able to tailor treatment to figure out what works specifically for them.
Hmm. And so a lot of the issues you're seeing with teens these days are related to social media and self-esteem, you would say?
I would say there's a big portion of that. I would not say that's all of it. I definitely think social peer relationships are a huge issue, for children, teens, adolescents. It's navigating social relationships are really tough. And then in addition to that, managing some family relationships can be really tough, and so as you're trying to manage all of that, I think also just managing yourself, right, of just like your moods and your emotions. There's a lot going on. Then you have the academic, and then maybe sports, and maybe extracurriculars. So there's a lot.
Yeah, and I would imagine also that, especially between the parents and the children, that trust is a big component of that. If a parent, like, what would you say to a parent who's seeing their teen hanging out with someone who maybe they think, isn't the best influence on them, and finding it's hard as a parent to find the balance between, oh, I trust my kid, he's a good kid, like he'll figure it out, or oh, this is just a teen phase, he'll get over it, or going to the opposite end of like being that helicopter mom who's like, these are the only kids you can hang out with, otherwise you're staying in the house. And so I feel like that's also a very delicate line to balance.
It is. And again, there's no right answer. I mean, everyone has a different parenting style. Healthy relationships are really built on trust, respect, and emotional safety. And that doesn't mean there's never conflict. It just means that you know how to like come back to it and how to repair it. And I think that again, like I said, every parent has like a different parenting style. Some parents really want to be like more of a friend to their kids, and other parents, again, like you were saying, on the other end of the spectrum, is like that helicopter parent where they want to control every move. And I think that there's families on both ends of the spectrum where it worked for their kid and it was fine, but it doesn't work for every kid. So I think it's again understanding who your child is and exactly what they need, and just really being aware and attuned to what's going on in their lives. I mean, so many parents don't even know, like, what social media platforms their child is on, who their current friends are, what they're doing, what they're doing when they're spending time together. So it's really being aware and attuned to your child so that you can pick up, like I was mentioning before, on those changes. Like if there are any changes that you're seeing in your child, if you spend that time and you have a really strong connection, like you'll be able to notice and to see those changes. And yeah, that's a hard part about parenting is when you should step in, and when you do need to set those boundaries. And a lot of the times, kids aren't open to that and receptive to that. But it's our job as parents to protect them.
But what if you're a parent who like doesn't know how to like open that door with them? Like you recognize that you want to learn more about your child and want to be more involved in their life. What advice would you give to someone who's looking to, deepen that connection with their child?
So, I think a lot of parents have this perception that they need to be like perfect or have this expectation of what parenting should be, right? And I remind them all the time, like it's not about being the perfect parent. It's just about becoming like more aware, more intentional, more emotionally available, right? Like it's just about being present with your child and trying to find any type of connection. And maybe that's just not even talking with them. Maybe it's sitting next to them, watching a show that they like, having them, bring you into their world. It's really just about spending that time. You really want to think about, again, what I was mentioning before, like trust, respect, and emotional safety. If a child does not feel safe, like they're not going to want to open up to you. And I think that's where, kind of like when you're mentioning before, that very punitive aspect, if a child is constantly worried that, oh, I'm going to get in trouble, how likely do you think they're going to be to open up to that parent? Probably not very likely, right? So really showing them and fostering that trust, respect, and emotional safety, I think is really the most important part. And sometimes, like I said, it's just not even about like talking. Like you don't have to have serious conversations all the time. That's exhausting. Who can do that? It's just about, like I said, just showing up and being there, seeing
Yeah.
what's important for them, even if it's not important for you.
Yeah, I remember my mom used to, whatever book we were reading in school or had to read for the summer, like my mom would also read just so that she
Oh,
would like be able to talk to us about it. And
that's
I,
so cute.
yeah, and now looking back, I'm like, she was reading these like third grade level books as an adult, but it was just her way of like wanting to, I had my mom reading Twilight in middle school, but she just wanted to talk to me about it, and have that connection.
That's really sweet. It's like a family book club.
Yeah, yeah. So there are definitely small things. Shout out to my mom that
Clearly, she did a great job.
yeah, that parents can do to, open that connection with their kids. It doesn't have to be scary, and they probably have more in common with their kids than they think they do.
Totally.
Even though sometimes that generational gap can feel very wide.
Yeah, I mean, and it is in a lot of cases. I mean, when you talk about generational gap, like there's like a year that could be a generational gap, right?
Yeah.
Like you all the time. So that's why again, it's important to stay really relevant in your child's life. Like have them teach you what's the current thing and the cool thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So just as we're wrapping up, what advice would you give to people who are just feeling a little helpless or lost in their relationships? What would be some advice that you could give them?
First, I'd say please don't judge yourself for feeling this way. Your relationships, they're really hard. And when they feel like they're falling apart, it can really shake your entire foundation. But feeling hopeless doesn't mean that you are hopeless. It just means you're stuck, maybe overwhelmed, haven't had the right kind of support. So, again, as I was mentioning before, my advice is just to start small. You do not have to fix everything at once. So, reach out to a therapist. Think about, what the issue is. Try to set a boundary. Getting honest. You're not alone in this, and things can change. I've worked with so many people who thought they were, too far gone and they've completely turned things around. It takes time, but it is possible.
Well, yeah, it's really important. I think those things that you're touching on for me, what resonates is you don't have to do it all at once. And
Yeah,
I think also people think that they're the only ones in their situation. And really, the more you talk to people, the more you realize that everyone's just going through different challenges in life, and people are definitely not alone. Okay, so if people are interested in hearing more or connecting with you, what is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
they can visit my amazing website at goldmindtherapy.com. There's all my contact information on there. There, is an about me section, a lot of, FAQs. So please feel free to head over there and you can always contact me if there's any additional questions.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Gold. This was a really insightful conversation.
Thank you so much.